Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes guys, you read the title, you know exactly what this documentary it is that I'm reviewing. And yeah, because I just felt like, definitely I should review this. Yeah. So I gotta say, it's great to see that, in celebration of if not one of Spielberg's top masterpieces of, the films he's directed, and I would think it would be in the Mount Rushmore of Spielberg's movies. Yeah. And because this one film that was directed by Spielberg, celebrating its 50th, and yeah, because a documentary all about the definitive inside story of, this one Spielberg film that was a big game changer in the 1970s, the decade where, lots of movies during the 1970s were game changers, changing the way we look at movies today, this being one of them, and that of course being a little film known as Jaws. So that's right, guys. I am reviewing the documentary in celebration of Jaws' 50th anniversary, Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story. Yes. So the first things I have to say about this documentary, well, because I was aware and knew that this documentary was upon us, and that, it would be making its way to Disney Plus. And, the getup I'm wearing, well, obviously. And, it's very interesting that Disney Plus acquiring the documentary, well, and on account of National Geographic, and obviously because National Geographic being a huge part of Disney Plus, not to mention that, National Geographic being responsible for bringing this documentary to life, as well as, other pretty good documentaries I've watched and seen that have to do with sharks, and I'm sure you know which ones I'm talking about. I thought they were really good. It's great to see, and in celebration of the big anniversary for Jaws, we have a new documentary, because there have been a few other past documentaries about Jaws, but, never fails for some documentaries to always be fresh and new, and I think for a lot of us, we knew a good majority of what went down in the making of Jaws, the catastrophic filmmaking of Jaws, like it was complete hell and madness for the crew of Jaws, and Spielberg as well. The fact that they shot most of the film in the ocean, besides filming on the filming locations for the Amity Island, what else went down into the making of this. But at the same time, there obviously was more about the making of Jaws that me and you didn't fully know about. And it's thanks to this documentary. The more we've gotten to know about what went down in the making of Jaws, and because there was a lot of other stuff that I didn't fully know about, was not fully aware of, but until now, thanks to this documentary. And with what most of the cast from Jaws, not just Spielberg, but also with the appearance of, those that actually were not actual, actors or anything like that, but they were a part of Jaws, and, really getting the vibe and feel, the atmosphere of the Amity Island, and the people that reside on the Amity Island. It's amazing. And most of them, they didn't start off being actors and such. And one thing that the documentary points out, because, I'll get to that in a moment, because with how many actual actors, were a part of Jaws. Because when, say, we learn about how this all came to be with the creation of Jaws, starting with the book, keep in mind, because this is based off of a book. I'm sure you guys probably know this by now. And when, yeah, it wouldn't take that long for Jaws, the book itself, to be adapted into a movie. Yeah, it's amazing. Even the author of Jaws, he had no problem at all for this to soon be turned into a motion picture. Yeah. And, you know, I found myself enjoying this documentary, of course, and because, well, I mean, obviously for me, and the same goes for you, how can you not love Jaws and be so fascinated with what went down, the making and the history of Spielberg and the rest, and those at Universal Pictures bringing this shark masterpiece to life. Yeah. And everybody that was involved in this documentary, you know, a few guest appearances, you know, those that were not involved in Jaws, but yeah, still. The fondest memories they had of when they saw Jaws, and how much of a big influence Jaws had struck them. And of course, you know, for that matter, the work of Spielberg being a huge influence on them as well. Yeah. And what would come next for Jaws itself after it was finally finished and complete. And, yeah. And even as the years passed and the decades, Jaws still to this day, you know, still being a beloved classic from Universal, Spielberg, you name it. Just, yeah. Just overall, you know, the documentary itself, Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story, it's excellent. Okay, so, with the first things I've had to say about the documentary out of the way now, this time I'm actually not going to read the description / the story, because there really isn't one for me to read and such. You get what I'm saying, just, yeah. So let's now dive in / break down the documentary itself. Yeah, well, yeah, because like with most documentaries, the way they start off, and in this case for this one, because, yeah, like, you know, Spielberg remembers, like, going to see a screening of Jaws at a movie theater and such, and a little montage of those that, you know, are to appear in this documentary, what they have to say about Jaws. But then after all that, because, yeah, then we get into when, say, it all began. The late author of Jaws, whom was responsible for bringing Jaws to life, and that, of course, being the late Peter Benchley. Yeah, because ever since he was a boy, you know, he and his dad, along with his brother, which being Nat Benchley, did I say Branchley? Sorry. The Benchley family, yeah. Peter, and with via archive footage and audio recordings of Peter, you know, Peter explaining that when he was a boy, his dad took him out fishing and stuff like that, and Peter having encountered some sharks. And Peter, at that time, really didn't have the full understanding and knowledge of sharks. I mean, he studied them when he was a young boy, but still, he was still missing out on really understanding about the sharks and such. Despite, you know, having encountered some sharks out in the ocean while fishing, and studying them in class and so on, but still, yeah. And also, yeah, the rest of the Benchley family, because, you know, we also have the daughter of Peter, and Wendy Benchley, whom also appears in this documentary, Tracy Benchley Turner. Yeah. Well, what helped Peter really understand about the sharks, and what would lead him to write a novel, which would end up being called Jaws, was this documentary called Blue Water, White Death. Yeah, did anybody hear about that documentary? Yeah. And well, because those that were responsible for bringing that documentary to life, Blue Water, White Death, well, those that actually would find themselves being a part of Jaws, helping out, like, actually get some footage of actual sharks, and by incorporating that into the film Jaws. The late Ron Taylor, and most notably, Valerie Taylor, you know, the two Australian experts of sharks and such, yeah, so the two of them being responsible for bringing that documentary to life, and that documentary, and someone else who, you know, caught a shark, being a huge influence on Peter. And again, this would lead him to write the novel Jaws. And it went through various different titles. Like, it didn't start off being called Jaws. That was not the first title that was considered for Peter's novel. And, you know, them explaining, each of them explaining about what Peter had written into the novel, the various characters, and with the shark itself, you know. And, you know, even though, because Peter unintentionally, not portraying the shark as evil and so on, because, I mean, that's the thing. And with some experts who know about sharks that appear in this documentary, each of them explain that that's just what the sharks are like. If they are triggered and if, you know, they think this is food and so on, then they do their thing. Simple as that. Yeah. And yeah, but just, you know, despite that, you know, unintentionally Peter not portraying the shark as evil, still, with what he was incorporating into the novel, it's understandable. Yeah. And with the various titles that the novel would go through, eventually it was settled on Jaws. And the way the shark looked on the cover of the novel / book, well, I mean, I think, yeah, because it was best said by Wendy Benchley. It looked like a penis with a mouth and such. I don't know, because picturing the image of that book, because I've seen that image before, you know, with how it looked in the novel. I don't know, because I don't think, I guess that's just me. I don't see that. What about you guys? Like, could you see it too? And because she brought it up, thanks to Wendy? But yeah. And not long after Peter finished and completed the novel, and it was published, and it didn't take that long for the novel of Jaws to become a bestseller. Well, not long after that, those at Universal would be interested in bringing Jaws to life on the big screen, and even, yeah, Peter being informed by this, and he didn't care. He was more than happy for it to be optioned off and so on, you know. Meanwhile, Spielberg. Let's talk about Spielberg now. I mean, yeah, because the documentary talks about Spielberg technically before Peter, but still. Well, Spielberg, because those at Universal, like Sidney Sheinberg, yeah, you know, because having known Spielberg, and he was a very young and talented filmmaker, and most prominently because, you know, he had done, say, the pilot for Night Gallery, with, you know, the second segment with Joan Crawford, you know, that one, Eyes. But other works that Spielberg would do in the realm of Universal, like most prominently, his first movie, which was a TV movie, not theatrical, Duel. And, yeah, because with what Spielberg brought to Duel was amazing. But when Sugarland Express would come, oh yeah, because that was another biggie for Spielberg where, wow, because this young kid had some good talent for doing filmmaking. You know, even Robert Zemeckis, who appears in the documentary himself, because, you know, his experience seeing Sugarland Express and being amazed with what Spielberg did. And when Zemeckis got to know Spielberg, and Zemeckis looking up to Spielberg being one of Zemeckis' heroes, and man, because had it not been for, I guarantee you, had it not been for Sugarland Express and Spielberg, if Zemeckis had not crossed paths with those two, then yeah, then Zemeckis, like, where would he end up going to? Like, yeah, with those, look where Zemeckis would go to later on. Just, yeah. But yeah, so, you know, with Sugarland Express being amazing, and after Spielberg was finished with Sugarland Express, well, actually, this I didn't know, where he actually was developing and, you know, coming up with an idea of doing an alien picture, which would end up being Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But before he would do that, and when he would find himself at Universal once again, and he would come across these, you know, stack of papers and scripts and such, and one that he would have his eyes sight on is Jaws. he had no idea what Jaws meant. Was it about, like, say, dentistry or something? Well, I mean, yeah, because with the word Jaws, because do dentistry in the of the teeth of the jaws, but that's not what it was. And yeah, it didn't take too long for Spielberg to be fully aware of what Jaws was, and when he read the novel, and yeah, obviously he loved the novel. Even Spielberg today, stating in the documentary that if he had read the novel today, then yeah, he would like before been amazed and just all wow, you know. And yeah, and in fact Spielberg was interested in helming this project. However, apparently, and as it's explained, the two big guys who at the time, you know, they ran Universal, you know, they were big-time producers at Universal. David Brown and Richard D. Zanuck, I think, yeah, I'm getting his last name right. They were more than happy, like, for Spielberg being interested in directing this, but unfortunately they told him that someone else was in consideration for directing. But thankfully, that didn't last long, and yeah, obviously, sure enough, from there on, Spielberg would get the director's chair. Yeah. You know, and also the mentioning of, you know, all the various young filmmakers, and Spielberg being one of them, you know, from, say, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, and Brian De Palma, all of them, just, they were they started to become these big-time directors. They were the next generation of filmmakers, and as the documentary explains, and how they were going to change the realm of cinema in a brand new way, just, yeah. And also, George Lucas himself appearing in this documentary, and when he first knew Spielberg at Universal, and obviously, you know, even like, say, around the time when, for Lucas himself, being a part of Universal, well, because having direct his second feature film, American Graffiti. So yeah, like in the early 70s, yeah, it's great to see because, yeah, Spielberg and Lucas, they knew each other, and it didn't take too long for them to become good friends, and before, each of them would have big successors, you know, of their own, and of course, when both of them would collaborate for, you know what, Raiders? I don't even need to say the title, but yeah. Anyways. But yeah, so with Spielberg now in the director's chair, and, well, the location and spot that they would find and use being the setting and that would play the part of Amity Island, that, of course, being Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Yeah, a very nice and beautiful island, and yeah, even like to this day, because like nothing's really changed over at Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. It's like a time capsule. It's like it's always been like that, and how it specifically looks ever since when, like, say, Jaws happened. Yeah. So yeah, the location of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts being the official location to use for the Amity Island, and, you know, the things that were going on during pre-production, well, like, when it came to designing the shark and having it be practical, it be animatronic, and so on, and not to mention that those that would be involved in bringing the shark to life, designing it, sculpting it, and the molding and such, well, John Alvis, if I'm saying his last name right, yeah, the production designer of Jaws, because his involvement, he did various sketches and designs for the shark, and then the late Bob A. Maddie, I think I'm saying his last name right, but yeah, Robert, sometimes, you know, because anybody that goes by the name Robert would be called Bob, you know, for short. So, Robert A. Maddie, whom came out of retirement to help work and design and bring to life the shark. And not to mention that, if any of you know this, for you hardcore Disney fans like me, Bob Maddie had worked with the Disney company, and when Walt was around, he was responsible for bringing the giant squid to life in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and doing all various animatronic figures of animals and sea creatures, like, yeah, as I just mentioned, the squid from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and also working on the Jungle Cruise. So that's really cool. So, yeah, it makes sense, and it was very fitting that they got Bob to work on this. Yeah. And that's the thing, because there's been plenty of other people whom, they've worked at the Disney parks, from, WED Enterprises to Disney Imagineering, and some live-action feature films, but, with that, they've also found themselves working at Universal. I know, say, Tony Baxter has, Bob Gurr most prominently, because he was responsible for bringing to life the giant original King Kong animatronic for the Backlot Tour. Yep, that was him. But yeah, it's just really cool. So, and also the archival footage that is used, that is shown, I should say, in the documentary of Jaws. Yeah, some archival footage and, tape that nobody had really seen. Most of it, we've seen in past behind the scenes in the making of Jaws, but yeah, obviously more footage that, we haven't seen until now, thanks to this documentary. And just, yeah, seeing, Bob, Maddie on screen, and seeing them work on the shark, and they're, doing the casting, and doing the mechanical stuff, and those that got to see and experience the shark being brought to life, most prominently George Lucas. George Lucas, he stated that he felt and sensed that when he saw the shark, nicknamed Bruce, that with what Spielberg and those at Universal were working on, it was going to be a fantastic film. Spielberg, on the other hand, he stated that at that time, and when George said that this was going to be a fantastic film, Spielberg wasn't sure on that. He didn't believe it at first, but boy, did George Lucas predict it. Yeah. Also, the documentary does not mention this. I mean, obviously they mention the cast members, but it doesn't mention this, and I do want to mention it. And because of George Lucas, well, yeah. Another thing on Lucas is that he was responsible for recommending Spielberg to cast Richard Dreyfuss as the role of Hooper. Yeah. Because, well, Dreyfuss had worked with Lucas on American Graffiti, and obviously, because Lucas was impressed by what Dreyfuss did on American Graffiti, and when it came to Spielberg doing Jaws, Lucas felt that, yeah, Dreyfuss would be good to cast in Jaws, and yeah, it's thanks to Lucas that, Dreyfuss would be in another biggie for his, and yeah, playing an iconic character, one of the iconic characters in Jaws. Yeah. And speaking of the cast, and to speed things up some, because about the cast members, the total of cast members being 8, literally, 8 actual actors that were a part of Jaws. Because, yeah, you had Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, Lorraine Gary, Susan Baccalini, you had Murray Hamilton, and Teddy Grossman. Yeah, I said that right. And Carl Gottlieb. Yeah, I hope I got his last name right. Again, you know me sometimes. And yeah, because Carl, in this case, well, because he was a screenwriter most prominently for Jaws and helped out Spielberg some with the script, but getting to appear on screen in Jaws itself, yeah, as Meadows. Yeah, that being the name of the character. The rest of the cast, and as I said earlier, they're all real. Like, real people who were a part of Jaws and, when being approached and, asked to be a part of this film, and, the directions that they were given, just, yeah, amazing, Like, for example, Ben Gardner himself, yeah, who was played by Craig Kingsbury, because apparently, and I didn't know this actually, all of Ben Gardner's lines in Jaws, and when Ben Gardner, of course, appears on screen, and before he met his fatal demise, as we all know, point being, all of Ben Gardner's lines that are spoken by Craig Kingsbury were all improvised. They came straight from him. They were not in the script. Everything that Craig said as the character of Ben Gardner, he came up with. And it turned out to be amazing, and with the character of Ben Gardner. Just one of those, background characters, and, obviously those that, Ben Gardner being one of those characters that's going to hunt the shark and be rewarded and such, but again, as we all know, sadly, what would happen to poor Gardner, so, yeah. But anyways, and also, yeah, because some of the others, like, that appear in this documentary, those that have grown up by this point, like, Jeffrey Voorhees, who played young Alex Kittner, because his part in the documentary and with what he had to say about Jaws and, the experience he had, and when it came to, like, say, Alex's, death and such, being eaten by the shark, yeah, and how his death was performed, like, two guys just, like, moving him around, just, yeah, amazing. In fact, like, getting some of the red stuff in his eyes, just, man, must have been painful. But, obviously, he was fine in the end. And by the way, because fun fact, Jeffrey Voorhees, who runs, like, a seafood restaurant, yeah, he had an encounter with his late on-screen mother, the mother of Alex Kittner. That was really nice. Yeah, maybe you guys know that. Some of you. And also, Todd Rebelio, the brother of the late Chris Rebelio, who played one of Brody's kids. Yeah, him. His part in the documentary, and what Todd has done, and what we see in the documentary, he's, like, run this place where, there's all Jaws stuff on display and such, and keeping the memory of what his brother did in Jaws still alive. It's just, yeah, it's very nice. It's amazing. And Todd Rebelio, because, him being a background artist, as he's credited, yeah. Anyways, and also, Susan Baccalini, because Susan Baccalini, who appears via archive footage, what went down with her filming that iconic opening, and, because, yeah, when they talk about the opening sequence, with the opening credits and James Cameron, who appears in this documentary, out of everything in Jaws, his favorite thing from Jaws is the opening credits. And yeah, the fact that the camera shooting underwater, and as the credits roll, you're seeing it from a shark's point of view. You're the shark. And after that, well, seeing Chrissy, being played by the late Susan Baccalini, stripping down and, gonna go swimming, well, because, yeah, and of course, when going out in the water, and when, yeah, she would meet her demise, and fun fact, because, at first, the shark was actually supposed to appear on screen, attacking, Chrissy, but the problem was, and when they were shooting that, well, yeah, because, the shark was being repaired and it was not working. So what happened was they just, the way they did it would be just so iconic, where you don't see the shark at all. You can just see and get the sense of and feeling with what's happening to Chrissy just being moved around, and just the power and her screaming out, just And Susan even states that she was thinking of, like, say, in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, where, yeah, what's-her-face getting killed off pretty early on in the film, and even Spielberg being influenced by Alfred Hitchcock, and with the influence of Hitchcock, and with what Spielberg would do in Jaws, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just, yeah, it's amazing. Besides, because, even Alfred Hitchcock having a big part of Universal, definitely. And also, Hendrix, the guy who blew the whistle, and when, yeah, seeing the remains of Chrissy's body, yeah, Hendrix, and being played by Jeffrey Kramer, who does appear in the documentary, with what he says about being in Jaws, and, yeah, he didn't act before, but he was more than happy to be a part of it, and when he got in contact with Spielberg, and from there on, and just, yeah, and Jeffrey Kramer, not a disappointment either, being a part of this iconic film. And also to mention Jonathan Filley, who played Cassidy, the one teenage guy whom, was running with Chrissy to the ocean, but because he got drunk, he passed out on the beach, and yeah. Well, Jonathan Filley's experience doing Jaws, and according to him, most prominently, because, yeah, again, yeah, he is in the documentary. Well, because when he was cast in Jaws, he was first told to wear this this wardrobe that he really wouldn't wear. And he told them that, why not I just wear what I wear, my usual getup and such. And that's what he did, bringing his own clothes. And he even shows this, that he still has one of the shirts that he wore, and in Jaws. That's pretty cool. But yeah. So it was really cool with Jonathan Filley stepping in. Also, coming back to the shark some more, because I can't forget to mention this, because when it came to, say, yeah, again, designing the shark, well, by them choosing a great white, and with what they say about a great white shark, this monster and just, this beast, and, this being like, yeah, a very big and powerful shark, just, yeah, and even like, of course, with showing clips of Jaws itself, and with what Hooper describes and explains about the shark, being a great white, yeah, and also when it came to choosing, how big the shark should be in Jaws, like the different foot size, well, Spielberg settled on the 26. Yeah, the 26 to him looked perfect, and of course it would be. And like I said, because them working and bringing to life the shark, but boy, what would come next for them, unfortunately? The disastrous, difficulties when trying to get this shark to work in the ocean, and with salt water, just, yeah, but until I talk about that some more. Okay, anyways. Another thing to mention is, yeah, with the mayor of Jaws, and, what the character's like, and that also goes for some of the other residents, the islanders, yeah, as they're referred to, on the Amity Island. The whole thing of politics and stuff like that. And around that time with Jaws, well, coming out of that time, an era where, yeah, because, like, we had the Vietnam War, people, judging Nixon, stuff like that. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And with what the documentary specifically establishes, yeah, I mean, it's understandable. And with what goes on in Jaws, and with the character of the mayor himself and the others on the Amity Island, and, the mayor trying to, keep this from the others and not to start a panic and stuff like that is, yeah. But, at the same time, and with what each of them say, even, Peter, the author of Jaws, like, what he said about this via, archive footage, Peter Benchley. Yeah, I mean, nothing really intentional, but still, But anyway, so, and, like, also, like, when it would come to, say, the part where, yeah, the 4th of July thing is happening on the Amity Island, everybody attending, all the locals and stuff like that, those who have arrived and traveled to the Amity Island, it's amazing. And when it would come to, say, the shark emerging, and Ted Grossman, yeah, Ted Grossman, the victim of the shark, and one of the 8 cast members of Jaws, with what he says via archive footage about working on Jaws, and the way that, yeah, the footage was shot with the shark attacking Ted Grossman's character, and even, like, say, one, like, shot of the shark, just, like, how it's positioned in the water, just, looks amazing, yeah. And to name some of the others that are in this documentary, Guillermo del Toro, Emily Blunt, Jordan Peele, yeah, and I already mentioned James Cameron, because, with what each of them say about Jaws, and even when, like, say, it comes up to this, and with that bridge on the Amity Island, and apparently even, like, to this day, because there's a sign that tells you not to jump off the bridge, but yet people do. And Emily Blunt, according to her, she had yet to jump off that iconic bridge. That's in Massachusetts. That's funny. And when it would come to, say, the shark almost going after one of Brody's kids, and how Brody, throughout the film at first, like, distancing himself from the shark, but man, like, and with what Jordan Peele and the others say and describe, how the protagonist is starting to merge and connect with the antagonist of the film. It's just, it's amazing. And again, because, you know, the shark almost going after one of Brody's kids? And even, like, Spielberg pointing out some deleted footage that did not make its way into the film, and, you know, even, like, say, before the MPA, if I said that right, you know, they got to see Jaws. Like, there's one shot where, you know, one of Brody's kids, Michael, yeah, because where he was being dragged by Ted Grossman's character, while Ted's character was in the jaws of the shark. Just, I think you know what I'm talking about. Just, I think probably was for the best that was removed. And speaking more of the shark, because an alternate take of Alex when he gets eaten by the shark, apparently because they used a mannequin. At one point they did a shot where they used a mannequin being a double for Alex, and we would have seen the shark, you know, lunge out and attack Alex. And maybe you guys have seen that, and if you've seen that photo, yeah. But in the end, with how it turned out in the film, yeah, much better. So, and probably for the best that, you know, we still don't get a full look at the shark itself. Just, yeah. Anyways, but yeah, then when it would come to say, and let's go ahead and talk about this, where, yeah, then the cast and crew would find themselves now working out in the ocean itself. And looking at the behind-the-scenes footage, the archive footage that was recorded on tape, yeah, it's obvious that they would film very close to Massachusetts, right? They wouldn't just go straight out into the ocean where there's nothing in sight, right? Well, besides that, and again, because they did film near where, you know, Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts is. Well, yeah, because, well, that comes the part where, yeah, all hell breaks loose for the cast and crew, and when the shark wasn't working, the boat sank, and even most prominently the orca just, man. And for the shark itself, because, yeah, well, like, with the shark, like, being controlled and such, well, because, like, when it would pop out of the water, it would come out with its tail first, and just, and I'm sure you've probably seen the photos, just, oh my gosh. And Richard Dreyfuss, who technically appears in this documentary, it's unfortunate he didn't get to appear in this documentary himself, and instead we have, via archive footage. Maybe he was unavailable, I don't know, but maybe you guys know. But Richard Dreyfuss, and I love this, because Richard Dreyfuss has most prominently brought up that, you know, when it would come to the shark not working, or it would work, just, you know, the shark is not working, the shark is not working, or the shark is working, the shark is working, or when it would come to, say, the boat sinking, the orca, save the actors, save the actors. Jeez, yeah. And also, the fact that Jaws was behind schedule, and Spielberg, not fearing that the movie the plug will be pulled off of the film, you know, well, he was more worried that he could get fired. Yeah. He had full confidence that, you know, this movie wouldn't quit and such, but yeah, he only had the fear of being fired. And, well, I mean, you know, Spielberg, you know, he was doing his best. He was doing his very best, you know, and pardon my French, his damnedest to try and get this movie made and, you know, as soon as possible. But, you know, despite the fact that all the various troubles they had out in the ocean, and the fact that Jaws, it was, in fact, one of the first movies to actually shoot in the ocean itself. Because, yeah, no film had really done something like that before. But even after Jaws, there would be plenty of other movies that would shoot in the actual ocean. Like, the ones I can think of most prominently would be, say, Robert Zemeckis' Castaway with Tom Hanks, and the Pirates of the Caribbean films, obviously. Yeah. Where, yeah, because they've had actual practical ships of, like, say, the Black Pearl or the Flying Dutchman out in the ocean. Just, yeah, I'm just simply saying. Because, well, it's true, as those being examples of other films in the later years of cinema that would be filmed in the actual ocean. And also, this was pretty funny because, you you know, as I just mentioned, with, you know, Richard Dreyfuss describing what it was like with the walkie-talkies, and at one moment with the boat sinking, get the actors off the boat, get the actors off the boat. Well, apparently, John Carter, who won an Oscar for sound editing and stuff like that for Jaws, well, according to Spielberg, John Carter, you know, he picked up the Niagara, and he was on the boat, and he was just like, F the actors! Save the sound department! Save the art department! God. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, where they're at, and with the actors, the ocean's harmless, and seriously, I mean, with the boat sinking, I'm just saying, because, you know, but definitely it's that kind of equipment and how it would almost be sunk with the boat, and yeah, I mean, that's understandable. I mean, don't you think? Just, you know, just simply saying. Okay, but anyways, and to speed things up some, because, yeah, well, like, yeah, still, with them filming out in the ocean, but some positive things that are brought up, like when it would come to, say, you know, Brody, you know, throwing out, you know, the chum, and of course, you know, hence, come on down and chum some of this shit, and then the shark popping out, Brody quickly backing up, and then backing up further inside the orca, and with what Spielberg specifically says, and when he was directing Scheider, and just telling him to back up, and to say the iconic line, you're gonna need a bigger boat, and each of them talking about that iconic line, and it's like, at first, like, even like, say, when they were filming Jaws, they didn't make much of it, and wouldn't realize that that line that Scheider said would become an iconic line. Just, yeah. And even, like, say, other examples that they bring up. Also, more on Emily Blunt, because, yeah, obviously, with Emily Blunt, obviously, yeah, because her being a huge fan of Jaws, and apparently, Emily Blunt, her first on-screen crush was Chief Brody, and with what she says about Chief Brody, just, yeah. Well, and I can imagine others having an on-screen crush over Brody, probably, so yeah. Anyways, and also, like, yeah, not just with Roy Scheider, but Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw. And when it talks about Robert Shaw most prominently, because, man, you know, his involvement in Jaws, and with the character of Quint, oh yeah, because when they talk about Quint, with what Quint's like, the fact that he is quite an expert in sharks, and even, like, say, the chemistry between Hooper and Quint, you know, they don't get along at first, and their backgrounds and their personalities is, yeah, completely different from one another. And when it comes to them trying to take on the shark, even, like, say, off camera, with what Dreyfuss and Shaw were like, and how they got along, and, you know, even with Scheider, just, yeah, it's amazing. Even, like, say, most prominently, can't forget to mention this, like, when they talk about, you know, when it comes to the character Quint, because, you know, Quint, and it was great with what was incorporated into Jaws itself, that Quint was a part of the Indianapolis. Yeah, a part of World War II. And when they talk about the Indianapolis, and, you know, coincidentally, the fact that when the Indianapolis happened, you know, in World War II, that being the same year when, yeah, Jaws happened. So that, with the U.S. Indianapolis, you know, celebrating its anniversary, its 80th anniversary, and with Jaws, its 50th. Yeah, amazing. And just that whole sequence, and, you know, inside the orca, which, you know, Spielberg has gone on saying that it's one of his favorite sequences of Jaws, and he could just watch it over and over again, and with what each Jordan Peele, Emily Blunt, and the others say about, you know, the character of Quint, and the fact that he was a part of the Indianapolis, and the mentioning, of course, about sharks, with the encounter of sharks, and of course, yeah, a little description on the Indianapolis, because, you know, Quint's chilling monologue about the sinking of the U.S. Indianapolis and the subsequent shark attacks, yeah, and it's based on a real historical event. And the ship was needed to torpedo in the Philippine Sea in July of 1945. And the survivors faced a horrific ordeal, including shark attacks, while waiting for rescue. While the film takes some dramatic liberties, the core of Quint's story is rooted in the tragic loss of life and the brutal reality faced by the sailors. Yeah. and Quint just remembering the horrific screams of the sailors. And when they talk about, say, Quint, you know, the fear in his eyes, and when it comes to coming against the shark and so on, just, what they say is just amazing. And, talk about the attention to detail. And for that matter, because the attention to detail, because, like, when it would come to, say, the climax, after Hooper, you know, came face to face with a shark in a shark cage, well, when they presume that Hooper's dead, he was attacked and eaten by the shark, Quint and Brody, they're the only two on the Orca. And also, they mention about sharks that lunge and whatever it is that they eat and so on. Well, in this case for the shark, you know, lunging and, you know, on the boat, the Orca, and unfortunately Quint meeting his demise, and, well, when it would come to, say, you know, the shark now attacking, trying to go after Brody, and Del Toro. I didn't talk about Del Toro that much, because I will say this about Del Toro, because he mentions that the first records, that he bought with his own money was The Godfather and this. That's pretty cool. And he also mentions this. One shot of the shark, and when it breaks through the windows of the Orca, well, there's something in the shark's teeth, the meat dangling down. Del Toro bringing that up, and the nice attention to detail there, the meat that's dangling on the teeth. Oh, yeah, I agree. That's amazing. Just, really giving the authentic feel, and with the shark being real, of course. Yeah. Geez, because that would probably be Quint's meat, would it? Just, okay. I'm just going to drop it there. When it would come to, say, the idea on how to defeat the shark, well, Spielberg mentioning that it was brought up to him by the writers and screenwriters and such to blow up the shark. And Spielberg was like, what? But, like, when figuring this out further on, well, by having the shark have a scuba diving tank in his mouth, and as it was mentioned earlier by Hooper that they are very explosive and such, and they gotta be very careful with them. Oh, yeah. And with that going inside the shark's mouth, thanks to Brody sticking that in, and when the Orca sinks down some more, Brody, because, his hatred towards the water and the shark, just, and when he's got a rifle, and by trying to shoot the shark, well, you know, even the writers and such, they added that in, with Brody using a rifle, because that being the only way for the tank to blow up, and with it, the shark, because Spielberg points out that, you know, the shark cannot bite through a tank, especially with that kind of tank. It's impossible, but with the rifle, that makes sense. So the climax where Brody just, you know, show me the tank, blow up, and smile, you son of a bitch, and just, boom, the shark explodes. And that being a climactic moment pre-Death Star, and as it's mentioned, nice. And just the way the movie ends off, Brody becoming the hero, defeating the shark and such, And the aftermath of Jaws. After it was complete, it finally wrapped up filming. Apparently Spielberg, he had a panic attack after all that. Jeez, I mean, it's understandable, but with what he specifically says, just, the pressure that got to him and just, However, despite that, what would happen next for Jaws? When it would come to, say, them working on the film to finish it and complete it, there were a couple of more shots they had to shoot in a water tank at MGM, like the shots with Hooper coming face to face with the shark, or the shot of Hooper coming face to face with the carcass of Ben Gardner. Yep, those were, you know, post shots they filmed. And the film's editor, Verna Fields, seeing her cracking at it, putting the film together, and when it would come to, say, John Williams, whom does appear in this documentary some as himself, but also a little bit of archive footage of Williams as well, and when it comes to, Williams writing the music and those that talk about the music and score that Williams brought to life in Jaws, just, it's amazing. And thankfully, after all that, well, sure enough, when Jaws was finally released, it became a movie masterpiece. It made film history, and as I said earlier, it was another game changer in the 1970s. Everything about Jaws that they worked on, and for it to be finally seen on the big screen, oh, just amazing. And all of those that attended to see Jaws in theaters and seen some recorded footage that was taken in 1975 when audiences were seeing Jaws, yeah, just amazing. However, after the release of Jaws, well, because bad things that would happen after that, well, where shark hunters started to emerge, and all because they were inspired by Quint. They wanted to be like Quint, but that's not what the movie was really aiming for. It wasn't at all. It wasn't encouraging anybody to become like Quint, to hunt sharks. And this whole thing where, people being afraid to go back in the water and thinking that sharks were bad. But even when, say, poor Vern Taylor and her late husband, they had to go on numerous talk shows. Valerie, sorry, I said Vern, sorry, Valerie. Valerie and her late husband, Ron, they had to go on, and the documentary doesn't establish this, but still, I'm mentioning it, where they had to go on various talk shows and such, news shows, to explain to the world that sharks are not bad, and if you don't bother them, they won't bother you. And the more detail they say about sharks, because what it can sense, the splashing and such, like, with people swimming in the water, yeah, and it could get their attention and so on, and mistaken them for food. But yeah, despite all that Valerie and Ron did, nobody still listened. But later on, and even as of today, it would start to die down. I mean, yeah, shark hunters still being out there, but other people that would study and learn about sharks, be very calm and be peaceful with them, not do anything, just to study them and come face to face with them, that's all. And the fact that they established that, without sharks, yeah, because what would the ocean be like without the sharks, the population of sharks? And the mentioning that there are numerous breeds of sharks, like whale sharks, hammerhead sharks, need I go on? Yeah, it's amazing. Even with Spielberg, other things that Spielberg mentions about Jaws, well, I mean, because it's because, as I mentioned, the panic attack he had, but also, one moment where he brings up that, when it used to be in the Universal backlot, he would frequently visit and spend some time in the Orca, because keep in mind, the Orca itself, it used to reside in the Universal Studios backlot in the Jaws section. And Spielberg, when he would often/frequently visit the Orca, because he would lay flat, on the sofa, the part of it that's in the Orca, and he would burst into tears. And Spielberg himself stating that, there was nothing to really cry about. But he did. And I'm sure there's a logical explanation as to why, And it doesn't mention this, but yeah, the fact that the Orca itself at the backlot would be demolished behind Spielberg's back, jeez. Yeah, but other various props, most prominently, one of the last surviving molds and casks of the shark from Jaws, Bruce, being recovered and being restored and placed, in the Hollywood Museum. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. Also, to name some of the other people that are a part of this documentary, I can't forget to mention him, especially J.J. Abrams. His experience seeing Jaws at a young age, wanting to get a Jaws shirt, and obviously, yeah, Jaws being a huge influence on J.J. Abrams. There's also Cameron Crowe, Greg Nicotero, if I'm saying his name right. He's a filmmaker and VFX artist. There's also a critic who appears quite a lot in this documentary, Janet Maslin. Yeah. And we also have Brian Scarry, an ocean filmmaker and National Geographic explorer, and there's also, I already mentioned Robert Zemeckis, Jordan Peele, Quentin Tarantino. He appears via archive footage on Jimmy Kimmel, expressing, him feeling that Jaws is a masterpiece, of course. I mentioned Sid Sheinberg, George Lucas. There's also, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, they are credited. And also Philippe Cousteau Jr., because the son of Jean-Michel Cousteau, appearing in this documentary as well, following in the footsteps of his father, being a ocean restaurantist. I'm having trouble pronouncing that word, but I think you know what I'm talking about. He's also a filmmaker. Gibbs Guguru, if I said that right, a shark scientist, and also part of the also a National Geographic explorer. And Greg Skomal, a shark biologist and author. Austin Gallagher, he's also a shark expert. Chief scientist, Beneath the Waves, and there's also Conrad Crum, who appears via archive footage, also having worked on Jaws, doing the special effects. And also, because Richard D. Zanuck, one of the big-time producers of Universal, because them mentioning the merchandise of Jaws, and one iconic photo of Richard, wearing the Jaws shirt and being surrounded by other various merchandise pieces of Jaws. And as was mentioned, Todd, where was he? Because, them being listed on IMDb. Todd Rebelio, because, as I mentioned earlier, Todd Rebelio running this business where, a store with memorabilia of Jaws, the mentioning of that, of course. And also, because I already mentioned Jeffrey Kramer, and also Lorraine Gary, because another thing about Lorraine Gary is that she mentions that her favorite line, out of all the lines she has in Jaws, her favorite is when, she shouts out to Michael to, didn't you hear your father? Get out of the ocean, get out of the water, now, That's great. Also, a Jaws collector, Jim Beller, appearing. I mentioned Jonathan Filley. And on-set teacher was Carol Fligor. And Stephen R. Palumbi. He's a professor of marine biology, Stanford University. Cynthia Wigren, CEO and co-founder, Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. I'm having trouble pronouncing that word too. Also, because the whole thing of politics, the late Peter, because he mentions about, Fidel Castro, the former president of Cuba, had read this book and found that very delightful and such, I'm sure I'm talking about, I think that's pretty much... Oh, yes, and Ian Shaw, the son of the late Robert Shaw, because his appearance in the documentary and with what he most prominently says about his father, and the fact that Ian Shaw is a part of this Broadway show, which being The Shark is Broken. I'm sure probably some of you have heard of that. The Shark is Broken, where he portrays his late father. Pretty interesting. Also, oh my gosh, because there was one moment where, Robert Shaw was supposed to deliver the speech that Quint gives about when he, was a part of the Indianapolis crew. And apparently Robert, I guess unintentionally, he drank. And he was out of it. He had to be helped get on the Orca and such, and it was not turning out that great. By the next day, Spielberg got a call from Robert, and this was very sweet and kind of Robert, because where he was like, what happened last night? What happened the other day? I am so sorry. I promise I'll do better. And because when they shot that, and what's in the final film, with what Robert delivers, that speech he delivers as Quint, with Quint and his involvement of the Indianapolis, that's amazing. And also, Spielberg mentioned this where, what he views about Jaws is home. The whole thing of home, even with hence the song Show Me the Way to Go Home, and just, yeah, with what Spielberg specifically states in the documentary, just, yeah, it's really cool. And also, to name some of the other remaining people that are in this documentary, because, yeah, Ross Williams, the founder of the Daily Jaws, John Millis, yeah, filmmaker, who appears via archive footage, Candace Fields, shark conversation biologist, John Mandelman, chief scientist, VP New England Aquarium, and also, because, again, the whole thing of people loving Jaws, and there's a bit of archive footage where Ariana Grande, apparently, when she was, 2 years old? Yeah, she had a birthday party, she had a Jaws-themed birthday party, and James Corden, who appears there too, because they're in a van and such, and, James what? Yeah, seriously? Ariana, at 2 years old, having a Jaws-themed birthday party? Well, this isn't the first time some kid would have a themed birthday party of whatever it is. I recall knowing about, this kid who had a... it was the mom's idea. A Law and Order themed birthday party? Seriously? You would never think of something like that, right? Well, apparently this kid's mom did. Oh, well. But, yeah, and just to wrap things up, yeah, the last remaining things that we see in this documentary, and with what each of them say about Jaws, the aftermath, and to this day, Jaws still being a beloved film, and Spielberg, of course, the last things he says about Jaws. And, and also, here's the thing, because, with Jaws 50th, yeah, Spielberg actually gave it a watch, and after watching it, he stated that he liked it. Yeah. Even though, despite the fact that he went through so much hell, him and the crew went through so much hell making that movie, they still made one hell of a film. The aftermath and results of how Jaws turned out, for sure. But also, Spielberg did say this, and it's not in the documentary, where he regretted making this movie because of how people treat sharks. But, at the same time, not everybody treats sharks badly. Those that do, hey, that's on them. Just, yeah, that's their business. The shark hunters, especially. No offense to them. Yeah. But yeah, just, overall, I think I've said all that I've had to say about this documentary itself. Yeah. Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story. It's a really good documentary. All about Jaws. And for its 50th anniversary. Definitely. Everything from beginning to end, with what the documentary all says about the movie itself, Jaws, those that are a part of it, from Spielberg, Lorraine Gary, Emily Blunt, Jordan Peele, J.J. Abrams, James Cameron, and James Cameron also, because he's quite an expert on the ocean, but ocean stuff and stuff like that, and also Jordan Peele, because one more thing about Jordan Peele, because I didn't talk about Jordan Peele that much. When it came to, he mentions about this one movie that he did, Us, and how he begged Spielberg to, use a Jaws t-shirt for a specific moment in Us. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Just, yeah. And not to mention that I meant to bring this up earlier, where, Jordan Peele, when he was young, and when, taking a bath in the bathtub, having that fear and getting nauseous that, yeah, a shark would pop out of the bathtub, just, oh my gosh. Seriously, even in a bathtub? Well, I guess it's understandable, even for a young kid like Jordan, and with what he experienced after seeing Jaws. But yeah, Jordan Peele, and, those that were in Jaws itself, they get to appear in this documentary. Del Toro, and those that appear via archive footage, George Lucas, and some stuff that we didn't know about that much, but until now, and thanks to this documentary. Obviously, for a lot of us, and as I said earlier, we knew about the stuff that happened during the making of Jaws, that it was a disastrous production for Spielberg and the others, but yeah. But, just overall, because, yeah, a lot of other stuff that's brought up in this documentary, yeah, it's amazing. Again, it just never fails for any documentary to tell us more about what we didn't know fully until now. Just, yeah. some great moments here and there from this documentary, you know, some good laughs and emotional stuff here and there. Just, yeah. What more do I really have to say? Overall, the documentary, in celebration of Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story, a fantastic documentary all about Jaws from National Geographic, just, yeah, without a doubt. And I'm giving the documentary, Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story, yeah, why not? 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story. And what about you guys? What did you think of the documentary itself? Any of you Jaws lovers and fans out there, and you guys obviously being aware that this documentary was upon us, and for it to finally arrive and for us to watch it, and, you know, obviously any of you didn't know that much, you know, of what went down in the making of Jaws. When the book was written, then it turned into a movie. Just, yeah, obviously for a lot of you, you knew a good chunk of the making and the behind the scenes of Jaws, but not entirely, and it's thanks to this documentary. And whom appears in this documentary? What were some of your favorite moments and the stories that are shared in this documentary? And obviously, yeah, all of you not only watching this documentary, but having a great time celebrating Jaws 50th, watching the film itself, obviously. Just, yeah, overall, what do you think of the documentary itself in celebration of Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story, and with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like as always. And so, guys, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of the documentary all about Jaws in celebration of its 50th. Jaws 50th, the definitive inside story. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. Take care. Happy 50th to Jaws itself. And peace out. You're gonna need a bigger boat for sure.